this last week, and I was reading in a Max Lucado book. Some of you may have the book. If you don't have it, I highly recommend it. It's called The Savior Next Door. It's a very good book, and that's where I got this information out of. Remember when only people contracted viruses? Remember when terms like parasite and worm were applied to living organisms and little brothers? Remember when viral infections were treated by doctors and quarantine meant the isolation of diseased people and pets? No longer. Nowadays, computers get sick. Preparation of this writing would have begun several hours earlier had not a biohazardous chemical warfare type warning put a freeze on my keyboard. Open nothing. Your computer may have a virus. I half expected the Center for Disease Control agents wearing radioactive gear to rush in, cover me, and run out with my laptop. They didn't, but a computer doctor did. He installed an antivirus program that protects the machine against 60,959 viruses. I started to ask him if one of those might be Ebola, but I didn't. I did learn that hundreds of thousands of viruses have been created. I'm assuming by the same folks who spray graffiti on buildings and loosen salt shakers at restaurants. Troublemakers who Trojan horse their way into your computer and gobble your data like a Pac-Man. I told a computer guy I'd never seen anything like it. Later I realized I had. Indeed, a computer virus is a common cold compared to the Chernobyl-level attack you and I must face. Think of your mind as a computer made to store and process massive amounts of data. Think of your strengths as software. Pianists are loaded with music programs. Accountants seem to be born with spreadsheet capacity. Fun lovers come with games already installed. We are different, but we each have a computer and software, and sadly, we have viruses. You and I are infected by destructive thoughts. Computer viruses have names like Klez, Anna Kournikova, and I love you. Mental viruses are known as anxiety, bitterness, anger, guilt, shame, greed, and insecurity. They worm their way into your system and diminish, even disable your mind. We call these DTPs. If you remember one thing, this sermon, remember DTP. That stands for destructive thought patterns. Do you have any destructive thought patterns? When you see the successful, do you become jealous? When you see the struggler, are you pompous? If someone gets on your bad side, is that person as likely to get on your good side as I am to win the Tour de France? Ever argue with someone in your mind? Ever rehash or rehearse your hurts? Do you assume the worst about the future? If so, you are suffering from DTP. What would your world be like without them? Had no dark or destructive thought ever entered your mind, how would you be different? Suppose you could relive your life without any guilt, lust, vengeance, insecurity, or fear, never wasting mental energy on gossip or scheming. Would you be different? Oh, to be DT-free, no energy lost, no time wasted. Wouldn't such thoughts would render such anyone a joyful genius. But where would you find an individual? An infected computer can be bought. An uninfected computer can be bought. But an uninfected person, impossible. Trace a computer virus back to a hacker. Trace our mental viruses back to the fall of the first man, Adam. Because of sin, our minds are full of dark thoughts. Although they know God, they neither glorify Him as God nor give thanks to Him. But their thinking become futile and their foolish hearts were darkened. Although they claimed to be wise, they became foolish. Blame DTPs on sin. Sin messes with the mind. But what if the virus never entered? Suppose a person never opened Satan's emails. What would that person be like? A lot like the 12-year-old boy seated in the temple of Jerusalem. Though he was beardless and unadorned, this boy's thoughts were profound. Just ask the theologians with whom he conversed. Luke gives this account. His parents found him in the temple, sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and also asking questions. And all who heard him were amazed at his understanding and his answers. For 3 days, Joseph and Mary were separated from Jesus. The temple was the last place they thought to search, but it was the first place Jesus went. He didn't go to a cousin's house or to a buddy's playground. Jesus sought the place of godly thinking, and in doing so, inspires us to do the same. By the time Joseph and Mary located their son, he had confounded the most learned men in the temple. This boy did not think like a boy. Why? What made Jesus different? The Bible is silent about his IQ, and when it comes to the RAM size of his mental computer, we are told nothing. But when it comes to the purity of his mind, we are giving this astounding claim. Christ knew no sin. And Peter says Jesus did no sin. Neither was guile found in his mouth. John lived next to him for 3 years and concluded, in him there is no sin. Spotless was his soul, and striking was the witness of those who knew him. His brother James called Christ the righteous one. Pilate could find no fault in him. Judas confessed that in betraying Christ, he betrayed innocent blood. Even the demons declared his unique status when they said, I know who you are. You are the Holy One of God. The loudest testimony to his perfection was the silence that followed this question. When his accusers called him a servant of Satan, Jesus demanded to see their evidence. Which one of you convicts me of sin? If you ask my circle of friends to point out my sin, stand by and watch the hands shoot up. When those that know Jesus were asked the same question, no one spoke. Christ was followed by disciples. He was analyzed by crowds, criticized by family, scrutinized by enemies. Yet not one person could remember him committing one sin. He was never found in the wrong place. He never said the wrong word, never acted the wrong way. He just never sinned. Not that he wasn't tempted, mind you. He was tempted in all things as we are, yet without sin. Lust wooed him, greed lured him, power called him. Jesus resisted. The word sinless has never survived cohabitation with any other person. Those who knew Christ best, however, spoke of his purity in unison and with conviction. And because he was sinless, his mind was stainless, DTP-less. No wonder people were amazed at his teaching. His mind was virus-free. But does this really matter? Does the perfection of Christ affect me? Oh, if he were some distant creator, the answer would be no. But since he is the next door and personal Savior, the reply is a supersized yes. Remember the 12-year-old in the temple? The one with sterling thoughts and a Teflon mind? Guess what? That's God's goal for you and I. You are made to be like Christ. God's priority is that you be transformed by the renewing of your mind. You may have been born virus-prone, but you don't have to live that way. There is hope for your head. Are you a worrywart? Don't have to be one forever. Guilt-plagued? Are you shame-stained? Prone to anger? Prone to jealousy? God can take care of that. God can change your mind. If ever there was a DTP candidate, it was George. Abandoned by his father, orphaned by his mother, the little boy was shuffled from foster parent to homelessness. A sitting duck for bitterness and anger, George could have spent his entire life getting even. But he didn't. He didn't because Mariah Watkins taught him to think good thoughts. The needs of each attracted each other. Mariah was a childless laundry woman. George, a homeless orphan. When Mariah found the young boy sleeping in her barn, she took him in. Not only that, she took care of him, took him to church. And not only that, she helped him find his way to God. When George left Mariah's home, among his few possessions was a Bible that she'd given him. And by the time he left her home, she had left her mark. And by the time George left this world, he had left his. George was George Washington Carver. Known as the father of agriculture, history credits him with more than 300 products extracted from peanuts alone. George became a friend of Henry Ford, Mahatma Gandhi, and 3 presidents. He entered his laboratory every morning with this prayer: "Open thou mine eyes, that I may behold wondrous things of the law." God answers such prayers. He changes the man by changing his mind. And how does this happen? By doing what you're doing right now. Considering the glory of Christ and how that affects you in your individual life. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord the Spirit. To behold Him is to become like Him. As Christ dominates your thoughts, He changes you from one degree of glory to another until you are ready to live with Him. Heaven is the land of sinless minds, virus-free thinking. It's a land of absolute trust. No fear nor anger there. No shame, no second guessing. Heaven will be wonderful, but not because the streets are gold, but because our thoughts will be pure. So what are we waiting on? Apply God's antivirus. Set your mind on the things above, not on the things that are